loudly so everybody can hear.
Let's move forward and get this work done.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. And doing it in a way, again, that we go at the right pace, but not go too slow and not go too fast. And we got to figure out what that looks like. We'll go a question here and then over here. Yeah.
So I don't know how to say this, but it seems like we got off track years ago, generations ago.
Yeah.
How do you get back on track? And it seems like Paul needs to get these little churches organized well before he goes off.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. This is what we want to wrestle with together. We're not bringing answers, but her question was, how do we go? What would it look like if Pastor Donovan was released to go and plant churches other places? How would that work look practically? And that's what we've been talking about, how to do it in a way that's not going to hurt the work that's there. Let me just tell you preliminarily few things I've come up with. One is that we have to offer a lot more support for the elders from a conference level.
Yes.
Like that to me was the first thing, like, okay, this means that pretty much the same amount of attention we're giving to the pastors now has to be given to the elders.
yes.
We find ways to get together with you, to pay for you to go training in places for whatever, conflict management, I don't know, whatever, preaching, or we bring people in, or we find a way to network where... What bothered me early on in my ministry was I didn't understand why elders, like, pretty much would get up and ask for offering, okay? And then would have an elders council. They would meet with the pastor, but there was not any clear thing in some of the early churches where I'm like, what's your role? And that's what was confusing to me, is to recognize, well, the role's been messed up, and that's why elders in many churches that are heavily pastor dependent, what's your role? Have you ever thought about that, elders? Like, what am I really supposed to be doing? And now it makes perfect sense, right? Like, okay, that's clear. If you've got 4 or 5 elders in a church, and you're all working together and splitting up the responsibilities, it's not too heavy. And then figuring out how, with the whole preaching thing, there's some churches, and they told me, I said, none of our elders like to preach. And one church just said, well, we don't want our elders to preach. I mean, they're very honest with me. One of them gets up there and he talks about, Jesuits and this and that. I mean, that was the reality. I'm giving you reality. So I tried to share with them, I said, that's part of our responsibility that we can help train in doing, but I don't think it's that complicated, because early Adventism, you know what happened, right? They didn't have a sermon most of the time. Did you know that? Their church, they were called social meetings, where they would do testimonies, but they would do them in the right way. They wouldn't do them I'm sorry, you've been to some testimony meetings, right? But you're just like, I just want to get out of here. This is where they give the mic to somebody and it goes on 12, 15 minutes, and they start from when they were born, and then they go through it. Come on, you know what I'm talking about, right? It's not appropriate for a public setting of some of the things I've said. They would do short testimonies, and they were very energetic and praiseful. They had a whole different way of doing church at that time because of that. I think there's ways that we can do it even with technology today. Okay, so I give the secret. Do you know why the conferences at this point spend $80,000 to get you guys take TVs and Mac Minis and computer and hooking you up with Zoom? It was all in preparation for this larger vision. Because that allows our churches to all be connected. It allows you as a district. It allows Pastor Donovan, if he is let's just throw something out. He's in Plains, planning a church. And he's at somebody's house. There's an interested family in Plains, and he's there having a Bible study with them. Can you imagine if we provided him with really good camera equipment and an AT&T MiFi, and he streams their 30-minute Bible study together as a sermon with your churches, if you wanted it that Sabbath morning? Wouldn't that be cool? And then Pastor Donovan says to Libby, hey, Libby, good morning. And Libby's like, yeah. And then they look, and Pastor Donovan's like, I want to introduce you to the Smith family. And we've been studying for a couple of weeks now, and they're, say hello. I mean, that's technology can do that. And then he's like, I want to share with all of you today something very important I found this week to help your spiritual growth. And you join right in through technology. It's amazing what we can do today. that takes the pressure off of the elders thinking, now we've got to all preach and we've got to, there's lots of options for that. So I think figuring out the specifics of how that will work, we can, that's what I want to do is dream together. We're going to go over here and then come over here. Yeah.
I just wondered how to get the young people. I mean, this wasn't supposed to be for children, but there's a lot of children. And when they got singing, they were up there to sing.
Yeah.
And I know
Yes.
the little girl I talked to today, she would be great in that group.
Yeah.
Our young people, they get the parents out.
Yes.
We need to get our young people up there and doing it now.
Yes, and I think this allows, you know what this allows. This allows churches to, you utilize a lot of people on Sabbath morning. If you want to have you guys done this? Where you have your kids do like 10-minute little talks for the church service? And they do 3 of them on Sabbath morning? It's one of the most beautiful things you can do. You just help them prepare a little testimony and stand up there and give it. That brings life to a service. There's lots of ways to utilize young people that way. Yes, ma'am.
Being new,
Yes.
I guess what I'm so excited about is the message.
Yes.
And if you want other people to come, you have to be excited about the product.
Yeah.
And you can go out and you can ask everybody to come, but if they don't come and get it, then you quit asking. And so we really have to be concerned and focused, because Donovan, I'll ask anybody to come to Donovan,
Yes.
I'll go out and ask them. I mean, we had great success with the violinists because you were confident in what they were gonna get.
Yes.
But if you're not confident in that message, then you go downhill real fast.
Sure. So part of it is that it's never, you can see the model, that it was never the plan for the pastor, the minister, to be the one there to do all the Bible work and to all the Bible studies. That's the job of every church member. And I say every, meaning you all have your gift sets. Meaning not everybody's going to go door to door. I'm here to tell you, I'm not a door-to-door person. All right? I mean, I hope you don't think me less spiritual. If you do, that's okay. But I tried selling big books as a call porter for like 3 weeks, and I gave up because I was petrified. Okay? I just don't like going cold call to a door and bang on there and have a 6-foot Great Dane looking out the glass at me, all right? That's just not something, I mean, I've got my own weird things that's not my personality. I feel very comfortable yesterday I had a call on the way here. There's a gentleman in Marion who, a church member asked me, I have a best friend in Marion, will you stop by and see him? His family's left him, his wife's left him, and wherever Julie and I stopped by, he wasn't home, but I went to the trailer next to it and banged on the door, and it felt wonderful. I was on a mission, and the door opened up, and there was a lady looking kind of angry, and I said, I'm a pastor. I'm here to see, and I gave the guy's name. Does he live here? She's like, no, he lives in the trailer next door. And I was like, wonderful, have a great day. I thought about it afterward that I said, can I pray for you? I should have said, can I pray for you? I'm a pastor. I mean, but I didn't think about it, all right? But I'm just saying, we all have our gift sets. And if you say, well, I don't know how to give Bible studies, that's okay. We all will find our place. The problem is that we have in our minds, we've got professional spiritual people now that take care. We hire them to come. I've heard from church members, why are we supposed to do Bible studies? I went to a church one time and the elders asked me, can you pay us to go do Bible studies? I asked them why. After like an hour, they weren't responding to me, asking them if they've been doing Bible studies. They said, no. I said, why? Because we need to get paid to do that. I said, I won't go any farther than what I almost did. Are you kidding me? But they said that church did not have a pastor at the time. And they said, you pay pastors to come and do Bible studies, you should pay us to do it. That's the mentality that's taken place. That is not biblical. Some of you're not an elder, you're not a deacon, you may not even be a deaconess, but God's put in your heart that you know how to study with somebody. You're okay going through an amazing facts with them. You like doing that. Great, that's your gift. So we all work together on that. So we're not concerned, it was a long answer, and I'm sorry, but not be concerned about, in every local church, there's still your spiritual leaders. You have to have your elders. It was very, this is the thing. You have your elders, you have your deacons. The spiritual authority doesn't leave a local church. It just gets spread differently to where shepherding is done from that group, and they help train you to feel comfortable at some point when you feel comfortable to say, hey, I can go study with somebody. Yeah.
To give a positive note.
Yes.
The AWR, we've been doing those, and the pastor's been starting the services off of those. And I have to tell you, to show you how it works, because I get to collect the monies, it's astronomical how much everybody, they'll just reach in their pocket after
Yeah.
they saw a good one and put even that much more
Yeah.
in the tray. So
Amen.
it just shows you that
Mhm.
it does work and what technology can do.
Yes, praise the Lord. Let's move back this way, up here, and then Svetlina, and was there another one over here? Go ahead.
Well, one of the things that, that I've learned, because this is the second, church we've been a part of helping to plant, and it's like as deacons and as elders, how do we inspire the members that it seems like you're only the ones doing it in the church? How do you inspire the rest of the church, when the pastor's not there? They say, well, we want the pastor because the pastor brings this, he brings that.
Sure.
This is the struggle that I think a lot of us as deacons and elders have a real tough time knowing what to do.
We just have to change the model. We honestly have to figure out a way again, as a conference, for us to put finances into supporting elders and deacons and your leadership. And I still say that if we were able to, we have a budget. Actually, somebody had donated some time ago at the conference office quite a big budget for elder training and helping the elders of the local church. And so we have a base to start with there that I would love to start in this district, to be able to say, okay, what does that look like? Let's start and bring in, even if it's through Zoom, if we can have people come and do some training on whatever you feel like you want to know about and need training in. And we can give some suggestions as well. But I think giving you more permission as spiritual leaders, as the elders of the church, I think those gift sets, honestly, I think those gift sets are going to come out. Because at this point, they haven't been needed. We have a pastor, the pastor does this, and this, and I would love to see what God's going to do through the spiritual leadership of both elders and deacons.
Well, I know what happened, this in Trout Creek, when we took and we gave the deacons and the deaconesses their separate board to take care of certain things. Instead of having all one board
Yes.
meeting, they divided it up, and I thought, let's start realizing, hey, we have a responsibility.
Yeah,
That helps a lot.
it does. It's huge. We just got to change the way we do some of that. Svetlina, and then over here.
Yeah, some practical things. I'm Russian, but I'm against the war.
It's a qualifier now. All right, we love you, Svetlina. No problem.
So I wanted to share the experience that I lived in Russia during communist time. We didn't have pastors, and the way they did the thing, the method was they called it field schools. So they had like a little areas, like 5, maybe 6 churches, and there will be a person coming and be teaching elders how to do things. And they also had a special field school for the youth. So
Oh.
every young man who was about like 16, 17, 18, like the youth, they did field schools for them.
Wow.
This is how my dad became pastor, my uncles became pastors, and all his friends actually out of church, they had about 12 youth,
Okay.
and about like 10 of them became pastors. Because
Wow.
this is the training they did, right from
Love
the
it.
beginning. And they did it like regularly, maybe once in 3 months, and they gave them like a homework to do.
Yes.
So they had to study something.
It's almost like a little seminary. I mean,
Yes, from Ellen White, and they gave them some responsibilities to
Yeah.
organize camp meeting or to organize something in the church. And they also had like weddings back then because you couldn't preach to the people, but wedding was a public event and you can say things and nobody will arrest you. So the youth was preparing them. The wedding you
Preach
can
an
go to.
evangelistic series at a wedding.
Exactly,
That's
if you
good.
go to wedding, you have a evangelistic program.
That's great.
So the youth
Yeah.
was doing that. And another experience is here in Washington, we have a Russian church, and they did this model that you described, not because intentionally, but they didn't have enough Russian pastors.
Okay.
So they had to go this way.
Yeah.
So this is how they do it. So then I came, they started was a small group. And the pastor was so mission oriented, so he would just go and preach, and he did online services and ministers.
Mhm.
And some people, like church members, they might complain a little and say, oh, he's so mission evangelistic oriented, he doesn't really pay much attention
Right.
to this. So people fight in the church
Yeah.
and come to the pastor, he said, I don't care, just you talk to yourself. And people that go
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and this
Right.
is we have answered to this. We just need to do mission. So the church became so big. It was like 300 people, and the pastor, like, there was no place to sit, and they started thinking what to do, and they decided to split the church,
Uh-huh.
and they because it was one Russian church, and people had to travel from many cities to come. So they started to do like they call it branches, and they did branches in different towns.
Mhm.
And because they didn't have enough pastors, so they had elders, but they did online worship. The pastor preached because nobody wanted to listen preaching of those elders.
Yeah.
So the pastor was preaching, and they did their own, like they had their own elders, their own
Mhm.
church elections and everything, and they did their
They
own.
figured out the model. Yeah, that's
And-
great.
and- yes, and then during the preaching time, they did at the same time, and they did the live. Then pastor preached in the main church.
Yeah,
So they did everything, Sabbath school, singing, everything, the nation they did by themselves,
yeah.
but the preaching itself was.
Would come in through that, yeah. And I think that's what we can figure out a model that's gonna work, and because it's worked lots of other places.
And it works
Yeah,
great, it still
yeah.
works now, and those
Yeah.
churches that branched out, they right now, like some of them 200-300 people.
I know, you
And the
grow.
interesting thing, as soon as they split it, the church was practically empty.
Right.
A few more months, it was
It's
full
full.
again.
That's how church multiplication happens. Thank you, Stephanie. It's good. Yes, sir.
I'm one of the newbies, but I think you've already got a blueprint for what was successful.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, as we went through our careers, some of us have run very large businesses, and without a guidebook or a
Yeah.
blueprint to that very smart people, we're lucky in here to have some very spiritual
Yes.
people that have a large background.
Mhm.
And I'm not one of them, but
Mm.
I want to help.
Yes.
And I know when I ran large businesses, if we didn't have a blueprint so everybody understood how success is.
That's good.
And also what was the recognition that, and
Did you reach your goals?
Yeah,
Mhm.
how do you get recognized as somebody that's putting forth more effort than the others?
Yes.
And it kind of brings everything together, because you can go around a table and have 10 different ways to do things, and without a guide or a
Correct.
blueprint,
Yeah.
it says, okay, but this is what was successful back in 1820,
Uh-huh.
or whatever.
Yeah, right.
Then I think we'd be just still going around in circles.
That's
So,
good.
and I wanna, you already touched on a lot of it, but I'd like to have some support and understanding in becoming, an elder somewhere.
Yes. Awesome.
So
Praise the Lord.
if I don't
Uh-huh.
know what that is,
Right.
I don't know how to get
How to
there,
do that, yeah.
I'm not gonna make it.
That's great. What's your name? Welcome to the family, Keith. Very glad you're part of our family. And this is exciting. This is what God does. Is He puts on people's hearts. You want to serve, and let's figure out as a family how that works and what God's calling is. Your church will recognize that. That's what's so neat. The church body recognizes, okay, this is a calling. We need Keith to help here. That's wonderful. Thank you. Let's go up here and then we'll move back. Yes.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is we're really shifting everything up one step, which means that there's gonna be a lot more responsibility on the elders, which I think is God's plan. What I see as a real need from talking with my church members is that there is, like this gentleman saying, and I've heard basically said here today, there is really great need and desire for training.
Yes.
Because so many people have this longing to, like, I know I need to reach this person, or
Right.
I know this person is hungering for the truth, but how many of us are just like, how do I actually go about approaching this
Practically,
person?
yes.
Practically, so it's just some basic training.
Great.
And also leadership for elders.
Yes.
Practical leadership for elders and practical training for the members to become active.
Yes.
To actually know, like a blueprint, like,
Right.
there's certain analogies that I've heard that are very helpful
Yeah.
in thinking about how to reach somebody. When you're thinking about that analogy,
Mhm.
it really makes it easier.
Love it. And that's been the deepest impression on not knowing how this transition is going to happen exactly, but that's been the biggest thing on my heart. It's like, okay, we have to up our game as an organization to figure out how we provide that training and support for both elders, deacons, for the whole shift of it. Has to all change, because we want you as elders to have the tools that if a member comes and says to one of you, as a team, I want to get Bible studies, but I don't know how. You've already been through, you know where to go get the resources. That's where the training in today's world is I tell people all the time, I'm not a specialist in premarital counseling or any of that. I've done a lot of it, but I know where to go get the resources for it. So I know how to give it and then facilitate it, and we would want to do the same. We have so much, our church has so much, I mean, there's so many people that are willing, that are specialists to help train, that we can, technology is wonderful. They can't come in person, we get them on Zoom, we have them on the screen, we're able to interact. Whatever we need to do, let's up that game. I totally hear you, that's great. Here, and then we'll move back over here. Yes?
Well, one of the things that I've noticed is that the church has gone to other resources. And what I'm seeing is happening here in Heron, what I've appreciated about Donovan is he's going back to the source,
Yeah.
the Bible. You
Yeah.
know, every single thing that he talks about is one text after another. And I can sit in some sermons where you never heard one text, maybe one text for the entire thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've been
Sure.
an Adventist all my life.
Mm-hmm.
But even I have learned that there's some things that work,
Yeah.
and it's in God's Word.
Yeah, exactly. So we stay with, again, I like the broader piece of, as Seventh-day Adventists, with our roots and what we understand, we have Scripture, you have the book of Acts, but there's scholars will tell you there's so much in there that we still can't figure out. We ask some of those questions. Well, what are the apostles? Where were they? We don't know those things, but we have, with our gift from all the insight given to Ellen White and all the books she's written on this, I've studied it for years and years, and I know everybody has their view about what they feel about her or think about her, but I've never found everything that she says is so, it takes a passage in Acts and it just blossoms it open. She just completely unpacks it where you're like, okay, I get that. That makes sense now. That's the practical part of that. And so we have this blueprint that I think is very clear. All right, this is what we need to do. Now we just got to figure out how to bring it here. That's where we're going with this. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, and I want to mention too, don't forget, prayer is an avenue to open up every soul, and the
Yeah.
Holy Spirit does things with divine appointments. Like you said, you're afraid or nervous about call quarter.
Yeah.
There's been times and things like that with me with other things too, but I said, Lord, what do I say? How do I do this?
Yep.
And the Lord says, whatever, and I just do what he said, and wow, it works.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
rely on prayer and the Holy Spirit to guide you in many things too, and he wants to make decisions right now.
Yep, love it. And that needs to be a part of all of this. I ask for you all to commit to that. Let's go back here. Yep. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about I've been made aware of the statistics for like retiring pastors in the next 4 or 5 years versus people
Right.
in seminary that are groomed to be a pastor.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that in terms of the reality of what we're facing in two ways?
That's a good point.
One, to this new model, how that
Yeah.
works. And I guess this model would handle that better. And the other way to talk about it is how do you talk to it to churches that are resistant to this model?
Yeah.
As far as that reality facing them as well.
Good. So the stats are, the last count that we had, undergrad, our Adventist colleges, we had 80 theology students graduating this year. That's all of our colleges.
Wow.
In North America. So there is another, there's a couple of hundred in the seminary coming out. A lot of those are foreign students. They're students that have come over and they're on specific visas, and so it's a little harder to get if you hire them here in North America. But there is, the last I heard was 50% of the pastors will be retiring in, I'm sorry, I don't know exactly how many years, but maybe it's 5 to 7, something like that. They've been talking about this stat for a while, but there's a huge group that's retiring out. So we don't have coming in, and we have a lot going out. So I think that obviously affects how this works. And we're kind of unique in Montana that we don't hire interns. We have no single church districts in Montana. We're different than other bigger conferences. So we can't hire, I say we can, but typically someone right out of college or right out of the seminary that's not had any pastoral, we traditionally, I understand, haven't hired them. Even though this year we did hire a pastor out of Southern, he's middle-aged, is my age, 51. I won't tell you my age, that's not mine. He's my age, and he's been doing great. He's had ministry background in the back. It's Pastor Michael Black down in East. So we hired him straight out. But it's a challenge when you don't have that big pool of experienced, to come into a multi-church district. It's sometimes it's good to have experienced pastors to be able to do that. The second part, what was the second part? Because that was the part that.
That reality of this ratio that we're looking at the next 5 years.
Yeah.
How does that maybe help with
Oh.
trying to convince other churches that are resistant?
Resistant, okay. So here's where I'm going with the model, which is you don't force anybody to do anything. Come on, parents. Try it with your early 20 kids, all right? I have a 25-year-old and 22-year-old, all right? They're the age mom and dad don't call them and say, hey, you're going to do this, all right? I take that same thing, meaning I would like to have. People ask me, why haven't you been talking about this? Well, part of the reason is I don't like to talk about things and say, this is the way it should be, and then somebody will say, well, where is it being done? And I'm like, oh, it's not being done in North America. So they say, well, what are you wasting our time for then? I want you to come and say, here's where it's being done, here's the results, and let's do it. So that's what I would like to get to someday, is to be able to say, here's where we tried it, here's what happened, and then I do feel like honest-hearted people in other churches, when you hear this, there's no discussion on, well, I don't really think that's what Ellen White meant, or this is one of it's like the Sabbath argument. I mean, this is so clear that there's not a theological argument against it. What there is a practice argument against it. So I would like to be able to tell the churches that are resistant, I'd like to say, we tried this. I'd love to say we tried this in the Northwest District. And in 3 years, we planted 3 churches, and tithe went from, I don't even know what you guys are at, $150,000 to $400,000 in tithe. We were able to hire another Bible worker in that area, and they're planting another 3 churches in another 3 little towns. I mean, that would be something that we as a conference, we would be able to tell other churches and other districts. It works.
And we have 2 years to do that.
2 years. Let's go with 2, not 3. Let's go 2. And 1 year.
Until general conference. So we can-
Exactly. General conference is in 25. But those are my thoughts of how to do it. I'm not pushing it on any church. We just want to do it where we think it will work.
And sorry, I didn't mean to try to convince them, but just the facts of the whole ratio of pastors.
Got it.
We have 12 districts and we only have 5 pastors or 7 pastors, and 5 without pastors.
Yeah.
Given point is not going to continue, and for other churches just realize that, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what's so strange is that when I got to Montana 2 years ago, there were 8 pastors in 15 districts. And something stuck in my head, in the back, it was ringing, that those churches that have not had a pastor for three years, some churches were 3 or 4 years, you either fail or you grow, you strengthen. And it put in the back of my mind that this whole thing, I'm like, okay, God, I have no idea why you brought us to Montana. I mean, this was out of the blue for us. I mean, we've never lived in the Northwest. We've never worked up here. It was clear we were supposed to be here. So I felt like, okay, in the back I've tucked it. Lord, this is a conference that they've been half of their districts without pastors. They know how to function in a certain sense. Where the stress comes in, honestly, is when you try to function without a pastor, when your church believes that you should have a pastor. Does this make sense? The stress that it put on the elders during that time, when everybody is expecting a certain way for your model to work, and you're trying to keep up with all the things in the same way, that's where it causes stress. I think that if we figure out a way to model it that can not put all that stress on, when a church is pastor dependent and they lose their pastor, it creates, they're still expecting that pastor there. And I think that's where you guys adapted and figured out ways and brought people in to speak and did this and that. But I'm encouraged that I think we have a platform in Montana to be able to really move forward with this in a way that would be, you've already experienced it. Rarely other conferences have done that. I talked to other colleagues and they have, Upper Columbia has 120 pastors, I think. There's different conferences that have, maybe that's Oregon. I'm trying to remember who I talked to. But as soon as they try to fill them in, they don't really go a long time. But we had to, because of financial reasons, we did that. So yeah, I think we're set to do some things. And then let me go back to you just a second. Is there anybody else back here? Yes, sir. No.
You mentioned it earlier. One thing that can be done is Bible readings. You can have somebody up front, they ask the question. You have a floating mic, you can have children read the text.
Yep.
Or whoever. And the leader can make a comment or two and move to the next question. And so it's appropriate for the worship service. And there are a lot of people in the congregation who can do it.
There's so many different things you can do for a congregation. I like it. I love it when I come to a church and I find that there's a layperson going to give their testimony up front that morning. It doesn't happen a lot, but do you like that? I love hearing people's stories. I love hearing all of our journeys. And we're not all gifted speakers, but people can get up and hold onto the pulpit and shake if you want and read your testimony. But it's a blessing. There's ways that we can, lots of things that can happen that way. Yes. Go back here.
I think you're talking about things that we would need. In any profession, the better the tools you have, the better it is. And if you also take the technology now, when we need to fix the washing machine, especially up here, since we don't have anybody to fix anything, you go to YouTube.
Yeah, right.
So if we maybe had a toolbox of so many different things, and we could call you and go, you know what, I need to know how to do this.
Yeah.
And you create a YouTube, or you create it.
Show you the
we can
resources.
do it on our own time too, because also trying to get all the elders together at the same time to do a training is a drag.
Yes.
Trying to coordinate dates, but if we could all go visit that, when it's convenient for us, it would mean a lot more. So I think the toolboxes.
I think our first plan for the technology is sometime in May. I'd like to do a Friday night and get all the elders in Montana together on Zoom. Each of you in your churches, because we've paid for the equipment for you to do that, and have your equipment there, your TV, and you've got your stuff up there, and you're in front of Zoom, and you've got your 4 or 5 elders there in church. And if somebody can't make it in, they can connect, but we're all connected, where we can talk and support each other that way. So.
Will you finance a tower in Heron?
Tower in Heron? Yes, it's called Starlink. That's what we're gonna do. Ask Brother Elon Musk to give us a way to connect. Yeah. Hang on just a second, Svetlana. We'll go, let me see. Anybody else that hasn't asked a question yet? Or a comment? Anybody? Yes, ma'am.
With the general conference, if they're going to redefine the role of the pastor,
Yes.
will they also then be addressing the elder and deacon roles at the same time?
I'm trying to remember. If you go back to the link, and I'll go do it because I'm curious now of what actually was on there, but if you go to the GC session and you find that section where we were talking about, I don't even know what day it was, I have to find, but they had it all up on the screen, and they went through what they were getting ready to vote or talk about, and I don't remember on there if they talked about that, but it would have to be part of that, I think, because it's all connected together. But I think that they were pulling for the general conference side. They know that already in Africa, South America, other places of the world, that their elders are fully the spiritual shepherds of the local congregation. So they're modeling it off of that, and I think trying to encourage too for North America and other places, Eastern Europe, and where we can do some of those things that will reflect the positive way to do this. Let's take a couple more comments and then we can close it up. It's Sabbath afternoon, and hang on, there was who had their hand up that I went back to? So that Lena, yeah.
Well, I just thought that through Zoom we can do elders classes like once a week or
Correct.
once a month, and just teach them through the Zoom. And
Correct.
It will be easy, don't need any building.
We'd love to, I would love to have once a year where all the elders could get together. I mean, that would be awesome, wouldn't it? It'd be so fun. Even if we need to do regional first, so we do all the West, everybody get together to spend a weekend. I don't know, but try to at least do in person, and then the rest of the time we can do through technology. it works really well. We do a lot of our meetings that way.
That Russian pastor also, he does a plan for Sabbath school
Yeah.
class. He puts online all the time plan how to teach Sabbath school, so he does
Yeah,
it.
so that gives people the instructions on
Yeah,
exactly how to
people
do that.
go online
Yeah.
and just get it, and they just follow it, and before that, he actually teach that class on that plan.
Yeah.
And he does it week ahead of the plan.
That's great, and
then
that's
they can learn
that's
and they can do.
truly giving the equipping tools that they need to do that. That's excellent. Yes, ma'am.
I had a question. So under this model, if you have a pastor church planting, and then you have each individual church working to support their members and
Yeah.
also grow their church, then is the pastor sort of like historically like a circuit rider where he comes back to these churches occasionally? Or does he come back for baptisms,
Good question.
weddings, and funerals? Or
Yeah, I find from the research that and I try to compare early Adventism, because that's what we have the most information about. But it seemed like they would they appointed elders, and then they would come back through to do baptisms. The minister would set up times to come back through. They would still do weddings in places where especially states where they were required to have a licensed minister do that. But you can clearly see where the problem came is when they would start to go back, and then they had so much fun going back, they just kept having fun being a circuit rider and preaching, and that's where it went off. But I think that no, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking also about like the family, like for instance,
Yes.
the Cash family.
Yes.
Okay, so they're starting off already with 4 churches and
Yes.
it's an exhausting.
How does that work?
And then you add 5, 6,
I know.
7 churches.
Yes.
So, he can't realistically be at every meeting, every.
Correct.
That's why there's so many cats.
Yeah. Good. It's a very good practical, very good. Yes.
That's why there's so many.
Yes.
Training and
Yes.
individual church understanding and having Pastor Tack as a resource to call when 911, we don't know what to do here, but
Yeah.
yes, I just realistically, we have a family.
Yes.
Every pastor we've had has a family.
Yes.
And our district is already an exhausting district.
Correct.
So there has to be some sort of release of pressure.
So let me help you a second with this, because this is, and I don't know all the practice with it, but we have to completely separate out that it's not anything like the old before. So I don't see him being at every board meeting. Because if you plant, we go back to the Africa South American model. You have 20 churches, 25 churches, a pastor. He doesn't. He doesn't. They still have a little different model that he's almost like a little conference president, as far as I understand those, where he's just kind of still, working with those. His primary job, as far as I understand it, speaking with someone who worked down there, was not to plant churches. It was still a little different model than early Adventism, but I see it that the elders would run the church board meetings. Really, it's almost like he's not there, but yet he's still, in early Adventism, they still would go back through. Let's go to the New Testament. What did Paul do?
Exactly.
See, you go back to the model. It was, he would preach, he would plant, and then he would swing back through, hey, I'm here for a day, it's good to see you all, da-da-da-da, or he would preach till midnight, people fall out of windows, whatever. He would do his, but his primary focus was that I'm over here planting this. So I think it could work. You saw that how James White said that James White was quoting Paul, that he was a year and a half in one of the places, in Ephesus, I believe it was, that Paul was there. So it can be, I think today, that the pastor could live in a place and he could still technically reach that district.
Right.
So,
I
yeah.
Just one more comment.
Yeah, sure.
But also, another thing that I feel like gets addressed with this model is a lot of times in evangelistic series,
Yes.
there's a pastor or an evangelist, he presents the meetings,
Mhm.
people
He's
come
gone.
in, and then he's gone.
Correct.
At least from some of the ones that I've been involved in, some of the people that come in maybe have not been fully established in their faith.
Correct.
And then a little bit of time goes along.
Yes.
They're then
So see what, you get the piece of the model too of what's happening in Heron right now. Do I understand that there's some church members from other places that are coming over and helping with exciting things going on there? That's how it can work.
And it seems like it would be healthier, I guess, is what I was trying to say, because he's in that one location.
Yes.
Not just for 6 weeks or however.
Correct.
Long evangelistic.
Correct.
Until the church is established.
Yes,
And until the new members are established, and then he's moving on to another church.
correct. So there's an intention, let's go back and say there's an intention to disciple that church plant. So he's focused on that until he gets to the place where he feels like there's, all of a sudden, let's say, let's just use, Plains, because I always drive through there when I'm going up there, and I don't think there's an Adventist church, but I think there's some people who live in Plains. Or what's another town? Troy. There's nothing in Troy right now, right? But is there people that live in Troy? Okay. So you have places where you can go, and then if there's one of those families that says, you know, I'm willing to be part of the core group that's going to stay here and help, then you instantly have, in North America, we have the blessing that we've got Adventists that live typically within some area, right? This is very different than when the work was beginning and there's no Adventists. I mean, they're coming out and there's nobody there, and the pastor had to go stay for a year or two to really get them grounded and keep expanding. But here, I think we just help each other. We become involved in helping where those church plants are. And I like the model that you're doing, because you've got people that are excited to go and help the Heron group and be part of that new family. I think we could do that all over this area. I mean, think about it. With every little church, every little town, how many do you have? You can ask Pastor Donovan. He's already got them all listed down. What's your population in every one of these little groups? When I drove to Glendive last week, I drive through Colstrip, drive through Forsyth, drive through the next one. I'm like, there's 3,000 or 4,000 people living here. Where's our group? Where's our group? I mean, that's what we can do. That's what I would love to see happen. Amen. In your area. We'll do one more, and then two more, and then we can wrap up. Yes.
Well, I can verify that this idea of doing testimonies, especially when you're a young church, it helps you to get to know the people. You set amount of time that they have, their little testimony, and that it all wraps around how did you get to know Jesus Christ?
Yeah.
That's the purpose of it.
Yeah.
But boy, I tell you, after we did that in the church I just came from, wow, I mean, the church grew like crazy.
Powerful. And that's because we overcome the dragon by the word of our testimony, the blood of the Lamb. The blueprint's there, bro. Keep. All right, yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the general conference and the church manual and the definition change.
Yeah.
Did that come about as kind of these kind of thinking and going back to this model, and why was it removed? And is it at GC level, like global level? How can that be? Because the rest of the country, the rest of the world is already operating that way. Is it just resistance in North America?
That's a great question. And this is one I think that I haven't studied into that as much. Just this morning, I was reading something that when I was doing some other preparation and looking up something for this, and I came across a couple of Ellen White quotes where she was talking about the General Conference being the highest body, that God ordains when his people get together, the decisions made on there, and we're supposed to follow those. And so that's a wrestling piece in my mind to understand how could this have happened to go in this direction why didn't God steer it some other way? But then I look at history, and you heard already, I go back to, we can't think that, and actually in the quote that I read, Ellen White said, that group is not infallible. So I think she was trying to counter it with how the papal thinking is, that there's an infallibility with decisions that come from the pontiff and so forth. She was kind of countering it with that. But I think that there's enough evidence from everything, and just exactly the way I presented it as it came through, that there was just a movement that took place that was overwhelming, if you want to say, as churches begin to ask for this, and the conferences begin to appoint people, and it got to the place where in 1932, when the first manual came out, that they just printed and solidified what was actively going on, even though there had been resistance with a lot of people to try to keep that from happening. So I don't understand all of that exactly myself. And I think it's going to come out as we come along. I think some of those discussions will come up because I'm very much one. Honestly, we are a church family. Even if I personally disagree with the decision that's made at the general conference level, I'm going to submit to it. And I know people are like, well, you're crazy and you should stand up for. I submit to it because who am I in my little thinking? If the wider body agrees on something, I want to follow it. It creates good cohesiveness as a body for us to follow God's leaders and what I don't know. We all wrestle with those different things. So I don't know. I can just say I don't know. I just know it happened, and I think there's enough evidence. And I weighed on the side of Ellen White's counsel. And I ask you guys, if you do minister hover, if you just do those in the E.G. White, and just watch what pops up, and look into other places, you'll just see all this come up. So I think the counsel is strong against it. Yeah.
I think the second part was, why is it coming up again?
Oh,
And-
sorry. I hate it when I go a long time on an answer and it's the wrong answer. Misunderstood question.
I'm thinking more like, you said it came up for a vote or
Yes.
consideration for a vote, but it wasn't, and it came up again.
Yes, so what happened is in the GC gentlemen that were involved with it all said it was their mistake to attach it to, they had it with another vote that was with another document as well, and there was a problem with the other document. So the vote on the floor was the whole thing has to go back. They can't even split it. It's like you got to go back, send it back. So that part for the role of the minister got sent back with it. And they were like, okay, we realize next time, he said, we've talked about it already, and we would like to separate it out so that it's a vote to come that's going to clarify. Literally, I almost fell off my chair at GC when they started putting that on the screen. I was like, are you kidding me? This is exactly. So I approached the GC person and said, can we start a group to talk about this? It's like, I love that. And we started pulling people together. So it's most likely going to come back.
But at a worldwide level.
At a worldwide level. So it could be in 2025 that this is voted in. What I've shared with you today is just in the manual. Like this is part of, and they'll probably have to tweak some other things because it's, how it all relates. Last one.
Just a comment to answer Erwin's question, but the whole concept of mission drift is where we're at.
Yeah.
I think, because any institution is established on a vision, and everybody's all excited about that vision, and it succeeds, it's very successful, and
Yes.
all these things set up, and then this huge engine has to be supported, and then you lose the mission focus.
Yeah.
You lose what the whole thing was started
Yes.
to do.
Yes.
And so I think that's where we're at. We need to return to the original
Yeah.
mission, get excited about what it's all about, what are we in existence for,
Love it.
and just return to that mission focus rather than supporting the institution.
Yes.
We're supposed to be doing the mission.
It's, again, we go back to you add for paying tithe. You know what that tithe is like. This is going to expand to pay for ministers to keep planting churches. That was their whole thing. It was just exciting. It was this energy all the time that took place, and I'd love to see that happen again. Okay, this is the absolute last one.
I just wanted to say for everybody, thank you for coming in today.
Yeah,
Giving us
thank you.
this information. I have been enlightened, and I know so much, I understand so much more, and I just know that the Holy Spirit in our prayer, in our willingness will make it possible to do what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm just thankful that you're here.
Praise the Lord. Thank you. I just share, this is a burden on my heart. You saw it. I wasn't expecting it to rise up as it did, but it's a deep passion because we all want to see the work done. Let's just follow God's leading, and exciting things can happen. And it starts with us here. That's what I'm excited. I'm excited for you. I'm excited for us. Let's figure out the details, and let's go forward. Yeah. And pray. You want to stand? I know you've been sitting a long time. Might as well stand.